Hello folks, welcome to Tuesday, and it is a huge video today, one I've worked on quite a lot over the weekend because I find it very interesting to talk about people and groups and chapters that people don't normally like. One of them being the Ultramarines, which we will go into today. If you like what I do, the subscribe button is down below, as well as the real subscribe button, which is next to it, which is the little bell icon. If you don't click that, you will never know that I'm here. Also, if you like what I do, then also please make sure that if you need any models, that you go and support Composite Games. They are really cool people, and they don't half help me when it comes to running the channel, making sure that I have gifts to give to you people whenever you win a prize draw that we do on the channel. We haven't done one in a little while because I've been too busy, but we will be doing one for Christmas, I hope. I'm hoping to get one done for Christmas, so if you like what I do, the Patreon is down below too. If you want to be involved in any of the draws, you need to be a member of the channel or on Patreon. And one of those things, you will get a entrance into any prize draw that we do. Also, if you're on Patreon, you do get early access to all of my videos. So the guys on there would have been watching this video yesterday. Hooray! With me to talk to as well in the comments when we go underneath the video. Anyway, moving on. Let's do some Warhammer, shall we? Let's do a Warhammer. Let's make sure that we're talking about the Ultramarines today. It's going to be one of those videos where, quite frankly, I'm kind of worried about how this is going to come across, because I know the Ultramarines are not liked by certain sections of the Warhammer 40,000 community, and not everything that I have to say about them is bad. Because, as I like to do in these lore videos, we do the good, then the bad, and then I show you how I would change them or write them if I was going to be writing them. So, normally people stay around for the first two parts of the video, and then the hardcore people stay for the last part and tell me how wrong I am about wanting to write certain things in Warhammer differently. But hey, that's my job. I love it, and let's get on with it, shall we? Well, that's part of my job anyway. The other part's teaching people about classics and ancient history, which could come in handy today. You'll never know. Right. Here we go. Ironically, the Ultramarines, the most interesting Space Marines. Or they could be. The Ultramarines, one of the most hated and postulated about armies in our hobby. But do they really deserve to be? I mean that sincerely. They have been described as beyond boring, the honourable battle brothers that not only bear the Saturday morning cartoon vibe of current Warhammer 40,000, but, what is worse, they seem to bear the love of corporate Games Workshop. This is presented in the way that they are marketed, thrown in the face of new hobbyists as the option when it comes to not just collecting Space Marines, which would be bad enough, but when collecting in the hobby in general, which is one thing that I see thrown at them quite a lot, which I actually agree with. If somebody wants to buy Tau at the start when they're coming into the hobby, number one, ask them why they're such a weeb, number one. But number two, that's their right. Let them go and collect Tau. Let them have Tau. Why do you feel the need to shove Ultramarines in people's faces constantly, all the time? I know it happened. I was trained to. I was literally trained to do that. We had one training scenario. I do remember there was one guy in a training scenario, and I've said this before, where we were looking over one of the brochures for Christmas in this big meeting, in this big general training meeting. And the trainer said, you know, what do you notice about the training manual? Not the training manual, about the booklet that we're going to give out to customers. And this manager put his hand up and said, the words Rebute Gilliman are mentioned 127 times. And he said it in such a, you know, I'm sick of this kind of way. The entire room burst into laughter. It was just like, yeah, because we're all sick of it. Even people working in the Games Workshop were sick of it. Corporate weren't, though. They loved it. But anyway. Okay. In this video, we will dive in on the chapter and Legion, pulling apart what makes them tick and examining if they deserve their hated fate. Then we will look at what I would do with the Ultramarines if I were given the writing reins. Finally, giving use to my degree in ancient history and classical warfare. Maybe. First of all, let's start with the good. Alright, it's time to dispel a few things. Yes, back in the day, the Ultramarines were the most boring chapter in Legion in our hobby, bar none. Okay? They were the stoic, normal Marines. The guys on the box art and all that. All this changed for me, however, with Calth. Calth was seemingly a victory for the Ultramarines, but in reality they lost 60% of their total 250,000 Marine power in that battle. 60%. They barely numbered over 100,000 Marines by the end of the battle. Against what mighty force did they lose this amount of numbers, do you ask? 50,000 word-bearers and some cultists. Yep, that's it. The World Eaters were not there at this point. 50,000 word-bearers and cultists were able to annihilate 60% of the most balanced, celebrated, and numerous Space Marine legions the Imperium had to offer. If this is not a final doff of the cap to the word-bearers and their capabilities and the power of their legion, I don't know what is. And it is the Ultramarines who do the deed. Kind of like an old wrestler doing the honours, quote-unquote, for another by being beaten in a convincing fashion by them. Happens quite a lot. They always say as a pro wrestler you should go out on your career staring at the lights, putting somebody else over, you know? And I think this is kind of the imagery that I'm getting from the Ultramarines being beaten by the word-bearers. They're doffing their cap to them and saying, you know, this, or at least the writers are, they're saying, look, they're powerful as well. Look at what they do to the Ultramarines when there's only 50,000 of them. Brilliant stuff. This battle also shows an incredible depth to the Ultramarines that is missing in many other representations of them. They sacrifice a lot eventually to come out victorious. It shows their frustrations and their losses, the crimes they need to commit just to keep the Legion standing for another day. I love Calth, which is why I bought the box set when it came out. Later on, the key blind spots in Guilliman himself, the Primarch of the Ultramarines of course, are revealed in the Unremembered Empire. This guy, Guilliman, is hoodwinked by seemingly his own brothers in Conrad Kurz, leader of the Night Lords, who creates havoc on Macragge before he can get to him, and is almost killed by him, let's not forget. And the Lion, leader of the Dark Angels, who we talked about before, who lies about Conrad being on the world and comes within a whisker of annihilating the Ultramarines himself. And he could have done it rather easily when we look at the numbers and firepower at the Dark Angels' disposal. We even have a scene where Guilliman is nearly killed by several Astartes, Alpha Legion, I think, in disguise. Yes, Astartes. Normal Space Marines. Guilliman may be in his robes and no armour, without any weapons to note, but still, lowly Space Marines come within a whisker of killing a Primarch in a rather even duel. That's crazy when you think about it. It almost seems to me that the Horus Heresy writers, at least the ones who didn't want anything to do with Unremembered Empire, really wanted you to like the Ultramarines. They really wanted to bring them down to earth and say, look, they're not perfect. Here's the interesting things about them. Because they understand that the best parts of a character that you write in any sort of fiction is their flaws. It's kind of like magic. You remember when I spoke about magic systems this time last year? Well, the truly, really interesting magical systems are the ones that have costs and fallacies and flaws. They're far more interesting than the powers themselves. They really are. Moving on, anyway. The Horus Heresy goes out of its way to show that the Ultramarines are not infallible. While still being undoubtedly capable and heroic, they lose, and they lose quite often. As a huge legion, it comes with the territory, right? Some of you are going to lose, you have that many Marines. This is what the Ultramarines were missing. The capability to make mistakes and see things turned around on them. The fact that they are Romans in space essentially means they have empire-building capabilities that other legions and chapters simply do not. Even Dawn and the Imperial Fists are far more of a defensive and reactionary force, with the Black Templars being the example of what happens when that demeanour snaps totally and they go off the rails. The Imperial Fists, as we will discuss in later weeks, they are a legion of extremes. Extreme defence or extreme attack, with nothing in between. The Ultramarines are the example of what a Space Marine Legion could be. A perfect balance of aggression and stoic calculation, of stalwart defence and shrewd leadership. To build an empire, Games Workshop does tend to realise what it takes when it writes about these things, to keep a large, meandering beast of a state under control. I mean, they should. They are a massive corporation, which leads us into the negatives quite nicely. So there you are, my good opinions on Ultramarines, and there are many. Now we come to the bad, and it does link into what I just said about Games Workshop. So the bad. Some will say that regardless of this balance in the Horus Heresy, in their lore, that the Ultramarines are still afforded far too much in the way of love from Games Workshop. The thing is, these people may have a point. Every poster and plot point is seemingly based on them in the current Warhammer 40,000 section of our hobby. A rather frustrating turn of events that I have described many times on this channel. In fact, I think one of my earliest videos when I returned to the channel to really give it a go, over a year ago now, it's like last summer, at the start of last summer, was about Ultramarines being boring. Literally. Remember my ranting, though, about the Shield of Baal a few videos ago? Where we were teased for months and even years about the return of Sanguinius in some form, spiritually or otherwise. Remember the hubbub and excitement generated around that? The last stand of the Blood Angels? Remember the feeling of turning that page expecting finally for Sanguinius to do something from beyond the grave, only to see Guilliman turn up with the Saturday morning cartoon heroes to win the day for the Blood Angels, since they simply could not get it done by themselves. I remember that feeling. I remember slamming the book shut and simply disregarding Warhammer 40,000 lore from this point on until something drastically changed. It wasn't a very good feeling. And yeah, people can have a go at me for being that involved in Warhammer 40,000 lore, but I love Warhammer. It's like one of the things that I define myself as a Warhammer fan. I'm not so much a fan of the game. I'm a fan of the setting. I'm a fan of the ambience. I'm a fan of what it does for people. That's why the channel exists. That last one in particular, I'm really a fan of what this hobby does for people, and what the actual setting does for people. The outlet that it gives you. There are annoying sides to it, like the meme culture and things like that, of course, but they're going to come along with everything. Anyway. Even the Primaris Marines did not escape Ultramarine judgment, let's be honest. They were locked into Guilliman and his machinations as a storyline of ruling the Imperium, and as Gabriel Seth said, they are simply Ultramarines coloured red. This mistrust actually turns into a positive for me, as it lays into the heart of the Imperium as a whole. It becomes very meta that the Imperium, much like the fan base, is turning on itself. But let me just bring in a bit of balance here. Imagine for 1 second that you are a fan of Batman. I mean, who isn't, right? Everybody loves Batman. Now, imagine that in every Batman storyline, Superman turns up to save him at the last minute and defeat the bad guy he was fighting. For him. Imagine that happening every time you read about Batman. That is what the Blood Angels have been putting up with recently, and other chapters are getting the same treatment, unfortunately. We have seen the Ultramarines turn up in person to aid other chapters, quote-unquote, with their issues, and the Primaris turning up to turn the tide of battle in favour of their parent, quote-unquote, chapter. I do not for 1 second believe all of these unnumbered sons of the Primaris Marines are the product of the gene seed of the chapters they were sent to reinforce, right? Whilst some of them may have been, I think the Blood Angels show you that some skullduggery has occurred here. Some Blood Angels Primaris suffer from the Black Rage and Red Thirst, sure, but others seemingly do not, and are kind of immune to it. This points to their gene seed, in my opinion, perhaps being from Guilliman and not the Great Angel. Right? So, while some Primaris Marines indeed do have the Sanguinius' gene seed, quite a lot of them will have Guilliman's gene seed, because it's the most stable one, and it's the one with which you can mass produce a lot of Space Marines that are not going to fall down and turn to heresy very quickly, right? The same goes for many other chapters. Space Wolves, for instance. Their new chapters are seemingly rather resistant to their flaws within their gene seed. I wonder why. I think I know why. I think it's because the truth of the matter, most of the time when you look at history, is somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle. Look at Agincourt, right? The English say they're outnumbered 10 to 1. The French say they only outnumbered the English 2 to 1. The truth is somewhere in the middle, what we think. It's around 5 to 6 to 1 the English are outnumbered at Agincourt, right? The same goes for this. All of the Primaris Marines are not Guilliman. He's not pulling the wool over everybody's eyes entirely. But, entirely, not all of the Primaris Marines are the gene seed of the Primarchs that they're going to reinforce. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Which is still pretty shitty when you think about it. The very reason the Astral Blades, the channel's custom chapter, are under the Ordo Malleus in terms of loyalty is to ensure that their gene seed that they get given is pure and from the Lion. Or even the Emperor, if you read between the lines of the Grey Knight's links to the Astral Blades. I didn't want to use Primaris Marines within my chapter if it meant opening them up to being the bastard sons of Rabute Guilliman, because that is what is heavily hinted in the lore of the Primaris Marines. There's no escaping the guy. Therein lies the main problem for me with the Ultramarines. They are everywhere. There is simply no escaping them if you're into Space Marines or the Imperium in general, guys. They hog the spotlight and simply do not seem able to have the attention on anyone else, lest Games Workshop fear that you may actually buy that set of White Scars or Grey Knights rather than the boys in blue who are on all the posters in the store. So hopefully that has eloquently put across my negatives around the Ultramarines and where they stand as a chapter and a legion. But what would I change? I would love for one day, by the way, one of you to do a video on YouTube about... I'm going to release the Astral Blades Codex later on this month as a freebie for all of you. I would love you to do a video similar to this about what you like and dislike about the Astral Blades and what you would change. That would be such a hoot for me. I'd love someone to do that. Anyway, what would I change though about the Ultramarines? Let's jump into it. Let's jump into it. I'm going to take a sip of tea first because this is, as I say, the hardest part of any video. There we are. Now for the hardest part of any video. What the hell do I do with this massive legion? For one, whilst I love what they do in the Horus Heresy in general, I would nuke one thing from orbit completely. Imperium Secundus. A garbage idea by garbage creative. Instead, the Battle of Calth occurs, but instead of gifting an unrealistic, although quite welcome, victory to the Wordbearers, I would have the Battle of Calth be the start of a brand new crusade for Guilliman. The Shadow Crusade. Yes, it's the same thing, it's the same name, but it's completely different in how it acts. Guilliman makes a rash decision, his greatest mistake in all reality. He takes his entire legion and barrels straight through the Ruin Storm that's created at the end of the Battle of Calth. What follows is a few years of the Ultramarines travelling through the warp, only to be dumped out right into the arms of a traitor ambush. Again, and again, and again. The Wordbearers, Night Lords, World Eaters, and Alpha Legion pull apart the Ultramarines on their way to Terra, slowly grinding them down and bringing them down to around 50,000 Marines by the end of the Crusade. 200,000 Marines are killed under the leadership of the Wordbearers. And under the Wordbearers, there are small factions of Night Lords, World Eaters, and Alpha Legion who are helping them out. But the bulk of the other three legions is, of course, on Terra, or, in the Sol System. As the Ultramarines limp back into the Sol System, they find the Horus Heresy has already ended. They are too late. The Wordbearers succeeded in keeping them away from the final battle. The Imperium is victorious, but the Emperor is not on the Golden Throne. This links in as well, because Lorgar wins. He gets cast aside by Horus, maybe, yes, maybe. But he still makes sure, weirdly, that the Emperor as a god comes around. He makes sure that the Emperor goes on the Golden Throne. And so, weirdly, you could see, is Lorgar, I would always introduce that, is Lorgar truly a traitor? Or is there some part of him that wants the Emperor to be a god so much that he wills it into existence by his own actions? I love 40k, and I love the way that certain parts of the lore are so elegant in the way that they click into each other. A lot of the times when I rewrite this stuff, all I'm doing is... Do you know what I see 40k as? A jigsaw puzzle that sometimes fits in rather roughly, but it still fits. All I'm doing for the most part in a lot of these rewrites is smoothing those edges so it fits in more seamlessly. Do you know what I mean? So it's not so out of left field. And I think that this gives it a lot more context for Lorgar's actions and things like that. So we're not just fixing Guilliman when I fix Guilliman, we're fixing multiple Primarchs that are around him. And we're fixing the Emperor too, as we will see in a minute. At the end of the Horus Heresy, each of the Primarchs left alive at least the ones who are loyalist, or are they? Not or are they? Well, each of the Primarchs left alive receives a psychic communion from the Emperor when his power is released into the Golden Throne, when they come before him. It is heavily hinted in my lore that even the traitor Primarchs receive psychic communion from the Emperor, which might have disturbed them quite a bit as they're fleeing into the Eye of Terror. However, only Guilliman does not. He's standing right in front of the Emperor. Each of his brothers has called him before him to receive the Emperor's word, and only Guilliman does not. Each of the Primarchs is told something rather disturbing, probably. I fully hint here that Lionel Johnson is told that Lorgar is up to something. You know, Jakatai Khan is told that the Drukhari are coming for his world in massive numbers, right? Guilliman doesn't receive any guidance. He hears nothing. When the Khan, the Lion, and Dawn ask him what was said to him, Guilliman simply lies and states, "I do not wish to repeat it. What was said was for me alone," before he stalks away from the palace. He takes control of the Imperium in complete anger, seeing his father as not appreciating the sacrifice he made just to get here, that the Emperor didn't understand what he had lost. He does a masterful job of holding the Imperium together and leading the Scouring, but in the end, his hatred of what the Imperium is becoming, regardless of his efforts, gets to him. Yeah, so in my setting, the Imperium starts to lean more towards the religious side of things, regardless of Guilliman, because he can't control everything. He's not omnipotent, right? He's barely holding things together in a superhuman effort. So, in his frustration, he leads a reckless charge onto Thessala, in which Fulgrim takes full advantage of this and wounds him to the point that he now needs the famous stasis field on Macragge just to stay alive. Again, that happened in the real-life setting, and this happens in this setting as well. But there is a reason for Guilliman losing that duel to Fulgrim. Okay? Cool. Now, with his return in the 41st millennium, I would have no Xenos or Heretic hand in bringing him back. The Eldar are not present. Neither are the Inquisition. Nobody is present in bringing Guilliman back. Instead, his wounds have finally healed on their own within the chamber, and he is awoken by the Emperor finally speaking to him. That's what wakes him up. But it is a voice he is not familiar with. The Emperor sounds aloof, arrogant, and more upset that the Chaos Forces dare to interfere with his plans. He is finally beyond playing at a god. Now he is a god. He demands that Guilliman rise and make his way to him on Terra, pouring his power into saving Guilliman's life, but stating to Guilliman that this has taken much of his power and that the rest of it will likely be in the Golden Throne. All the Emperor has left is to be gifted to the Golden Throne, and then his body is to be set free by Guilliman. He demands, he orders that Guilliman come to Terra and set him free. The Emperor is now finally moving pieces around the chessboard with the Chaos Gods where we can see it. It's taken 10,000 years for him to build up this power in the warp, to finally be a god, and now he is a god, but he's a changed man. Because you don't become a god and remain the same person. You don't. The Emperor is now a god, but he's not the same guy who went into the Golden Throne. That's terrifying to me, and it should be terrifying to you too. Guilliman rises with the words, "Yes, Father," and proceeds to annihilate the Black Legion Abaddon is leading to Macragge to stop his resurrection. So, all this time, Abaddon's been leading this desperate fight towards Macragge to try and stop this from happening, right? Because he knows he could lose the entire war, or be forced into a stalemate that he doesn't want if Guilliman comes back. Guilliman and Abaddon actually fight, and Abaddon gets the upper hand on the just woken up Guilliman. This is the only time I would have an Astartes almost beat a Primarch. The only time. Guilliman is staggering around. He still doesn't know quite what's happening or where he is. He's still waking up. And even then he's keeping up with Abaddon. It's just that, you know, if this goes on much longer, Guilliman is not powerful at this point. He is drained. He could die, right? This is a chaos-infused Abaddon the Despoiler. But the rage of the Ultramarines, after finally seeing their liege return to them, drives him back, drives Abaddon back, to the point that Calgar can fight him instead. In this duel, Abaddon kills Marneus Calgar. You heard that right. One-on-one in a fair fight. Yes, Abaddon finally does something right. Hooray. And Calgar finally loses and gets a hero's send-off for all the years he's given us in the hobby, right? It also makes his reuniting with Guilliman that much more tragic, as he is alive for just a few hours after his greatest dreams have been realised. I would make Marneus Calgar the Tony Stark of 40k. You know? He sacrifices himself so we can have this awesome setting. That is the most Calgar thing that can ever be Calgar'd, honestly, let's be honest. His sacrifice, and that of the entire First Company, allows Guilliman to be teleported away as the rest of the Ultramarine successor chapters arrive to drive off the Black Legion. Abaddon does, however, devastate much of the world of Macragge, though, turning it into a kind of a dead world. So he does succeed in other things as well. The Chaos get their pat on the head. They get their technical win, right? Guilliman leads the journey to Terra and barely escapes Magnus on Luna before finally coming to the Emperor. That'd be a whole different set of books that I would release as well. There'd be a whole series about that. When I say series, I mean like 2 or 3 books. I don't mean like 60. Fuck you, Games Workshop. Anyway, there, the Emperor tells him to destroy his body and release his soul into the warp. Guilliman, however, cannot bring himself to do it. At the last, he is still as weak as he once was in the Heresy. Instead, he takes the reins of leading the Imperium for the people of the Imperium, and not this god who has taken his father's place. He darkly leaves the Emperor imprisoned in the Golden Throne and rules in his name. You heard that right. He makes the greatest sacrifice anybody can make. He sacrifices his own honour. Right? And his own loyalty to his father by saying, "You're not my father anymore. I don't know what you are, but you're not my father. I fight for the people of the Imperium, as do the Ultramarines, and that's what I'm going to do. What I was created for, I'm going to rule the Imperium, because you clearly cannot." So he does. Things progress from here, just as they do in the current setting, until we see the Terminus Decree instituted by the Grey Knights as the Emperor's plan B for getting him off the Golden Throne to be reborn fully. We said that in the Emperor video a few weeks ago, and I'm going to go into it here. Ironically, the Emperor that returned through birth in our Emperor video would have been much more powerful had Guilliman destroyed his father's body when he was asked. As things stand, the returned Emperor is pretty much on a traitor Primarch level of power, whilst most of his power was spent bringing Guilliman back, and he left most of it in the Golden Throne to keep it powered through the psychic lens that is Kaldor Drago, who has taken his body's place in the Golden Throne. If you don't know what I mean, go and watch the Emperor video. It'll explain everything. This leads to a massive civil war between the Emperor, known now as the Returned, by his faithful. He leads the Grey Knights, the Custodes, Radical Inquisitors, Sisters of Battle, vast Titan legions, half of the Astra Militarum, and the more Emperor as a god leaning Space Marine chapters like the Black Templars. He leads all of those forces in a sort of new preaching crusade out across the galaxy, preaching the word of the Emperor. The Civil War lasts for 10 years and ends, and before you say that's not long enough, the Horus Heresy lasts for around 7 years. So, you know, the Civil War lasts for about 10 years and ends with a stalemate as Angron and Fulgrim return at the same time at the head of a vast traitor armada. The Imperium is, ostensibly in this setting, split in two, with the Returned controlling the Galactic West and Terra, and Guilliman controlling the Galactic East from Macragge. The 10th edition campaign that kicks off the edition ends with the Returned and Guilliman reconciling with the help of the Lion, who has arrived to save the day, but barely. The galaxy is a hot mess at the end of the start of 10th edition. War is everywhere, but empires are congealing and the Imperium stands, with the Returned as its single head of state, the avatar of the God Emperor of mankind, and Guilliman as his left hand and the Lion as his right hand. So Guilliman is his main counsellor and voice, whereas the Lion is his main enforcer and destroyer. A new age of constant warfare, but also hope is dawning at the start of 10th edition. The Chaos Gods, however, have more cards yet to play. What do you think? At the start, and by the way, the reason why the Civil War lasts for 10 years is because each month, we're going to do 10 months at the start of 10th edition, and each month is a new phase of the war is being released. Each month a new book is being released. Not even book, I would have it be in White Dwarf. I would have as much as a half of the White Dwarf taken up by the story of this new age, this new 10-year civil war between the Returned and Guilliman. You'll see every single stage, month by month, in the 10 months after this, until we get to Christmas, or around Christmas, where we have the final battle and the Lion returns, and ends this part of the campaign by bringing the Imperium much round to a stalemate, where we have the forces of chaos again fighting the Imperium as the big overwar, and all the Xenos races in between there fighting everybody as well. Brilliant. War everywhere. We love it, right? And we have more models to play with. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm okay, or do you think I'm fucking crazy? I don't know. Could be either. Could be one or two ways. I've been described as both on the channel. Love you a long time. I will speak to you tomorrow for some more hobby nightmares. I love you all. See you later. Have a good one. Bye.